Nikki found herself studying her husband with a gaze of disbelief and bewilderment. She was trying to comprehend exactly when he had transformed into the man standing before her. Or perhaps, she considered with a pang of regret, he'd always been like this, and she had been blissfully ignorant, blind to his true colors. Regardless, she realized the timing of this revelation was irrelevant. The past couldn't be rewritten, and the present reality was what matters now? Stephen. Nikki began with a steady and assertive voice. If we're investing in an apartment, it's only fair that we register under both our names. I won't agree to any other arrangement. We've been saving together for this property, and now with the sale of my grandma's apartment, I'm contributing even more financially. Isn't it only equitable that my name is on the deed? Would you agree that it wouldn't be right for us to pool our resources only for the apartment to be registered solely in your name? Stephen's shoulders lifted in an impatient shrug. His face was a mask of visible annoyance as patience were worn thin by Nikki's reasoning. He took a moment, biting back a sharp retort, trying to find a more amicable response, but his irritation, like a beast uncaged, got the better of him. Why are you nitpicking, Nikki? He blurted out his voice, tinged with frustration. What does it matter whose name is on the papers? We were a family, aren't we squabbling over who invested what is just absurd? I mean, seriously, wow, he shook his head in disbelief, his hands gesturing, and exasperation. We are a family, and to me, these minor details are inconsequential. Can't you see that? Well, if it truly doesn't matter, Nikki retorted her voice, calling me at lace with a hint of definition, then let's just register the apartment in my name. Wait, why in your name? Stephen asked, his expression shifting to one of bewilderment as he turned to look up at Nikki. Well, you said it yourself, you don't care. Nikki responded to her warrants with a firm resolve, so let's register the apartment in my name. That's how I prefer it. Hold on. Isn't it the norm for the husband to be listed as the owner of the property? That's the traditional way of doing things, isn't it? Stephen questioned his voice, revealing a hint of panic. This was a new side of Nikki that he wasn't used to. She had always been agreeable and always compliant with his wishes, but now he was faced with an unexpected resistance that left him unsettled. Stephen was taken aback by her opposition. He'd always taken it for granted that Nikki would agree to his suggestions, particularly on matters like this. Her new defiance was uncharted territory for him, leaving him unprepared and off balance. Stephen, sweetheart, just stop. Nikki interjected gently, her voice firm. We are living in the modern era where men and women share equal rights, and this isn't a new concept, so it's either both of our names in the paperwork or we're not proceeding with the purchase at all. Stephen is desperate to salvage the situation.
If you want to hear more from this story, please subscribe and like the video. Thank you.
Play this final card, but the transaction fee for joint ownership is significantly higher. You're the one who's always emphasizing the need to cut back on our expenses, he protested. Nikki, unflappable, countered with a smirk. Well, that's fine. I guess that means we'll need to cut back on your beer allowance then. Stephen was so surprised by her words that he nearly lost his footing. He couldn't believe that she had the audacity to challenge him like this for a whole decade. She had been meek and agreeable, always nodding along with his decisions. Now, out of nowhere, she had found her voice and was asserting herself boldly. The thought flashed through Stephen's mind. It must be her friend Linda's influence. She harbored a dislike for Linda ever since her first encounter. He suspected that Linda was the one filling Nikki's head with these rebellious ideas. Each time Linda visited Stephen, she couldn't shake it off. The sensation that her piercing gaze was scrutinizing him as though she were silently judging his every move, coincidentally or perhaps not. He always seemed to have a pressing engagement or an urgent errand to run whenever she popped in. Stephen felt cornered. His yearning for a spacious, luxurious apartment was undeniable, but the urge to be its sole proprietor was an even more potent force. He decided grudgingly to let the matter rest for now. Perhaps he thought he could revisit the issue at a later date when the dust had settled and he could strategize a new plan. At that moment, Stephen's primary concern was to steer Nikki back to her usual compliant self. She shuddered at the thought of her starting to question his evening absences or the apparent decrease in his salary. In reality, his salary hadn't shrunk, it was his spending that had inflated ever since he met Angela, and of course Stephen had been making every effort to keep the secret expenditure concealed from Nikki. Nikki was the epitome of an ideal wife in Stephen's eyes. His clothes were always immaculately cleaned and ironed, a varied array of meals graced their table, and she was always available and accommodating to his needs. Yet in his view, she was just too predictable and lacked the spark he crammed. She was in his eyes a bit too mundane and monotonous. On the other hand, Nikki was quietly reveling in her newfound assertiveness. She had never imagined that she could stand up to her husband and voice her opinion so boldly. This unexpected resistance was a revelation, a turning point that filled her with an empowering sense of joy. She was keenly aware of every subtle change in Stephen's demeanor. His late-night returns despite finishing work at 6 p.m. hadn't escaped her notice, nor had his increasing emotional distance or the fact that he seemed to view her as a fool. Oblivious to his actions, she was far from ignorant. She saw everything, understood more than he knew, and she was quietly gathering strength. She had simply become accustomed to Stephen being her husband. They were perpetually together, a constant presence in each other's lives. He was always within reach, a familiar figure by her side. She had accepted this as a reality, as the natural order of things, but recently Nikki found herself pondering deeper, unsettling thoughts. What if Stephen were to take things further? What if he decided to abandon her for another woman? The mere possibility caused her heart to constrict painfully. Naturally, she can fight these fears with her friend. Linda is seeking solace and advice from her trusted confidant. If that ever happens, what should I do? How am I supposed to carry on with life? Nikki asked, her voice filled with trepidation. Linda let out a snort of disbelief. That's precisely the point, Nikki. Life is about truly living, not merely existing, as you've been doing. It's always Stephen. Even that, honestly, I'm fed up with hearing it. Why are you constantly bending over backwards for him? When's the last time he even brought you flowers? Flowers are an extra expense, you know we're saving for a new apartment. Nikki defended, so flowers are considered an expense, but Stephen dining out at fancy restaurants isn't? Linda retorted, her voice, laced with incredulity. Her voice was laced with incredulity. Nikki, sweetie, how can he not see that Stephen only cares about himself and he will never, I repeat, never make any sacrifices for you? Just look at yourself working 2 jobs tirelessly, toiling like a workhorse, and earning not just double but 4 times what he does, and despite all that, you still feel like you own something. Nikki, where did you lose sight of yourself? Linda paused, taking a deep breath, before continuing. Remember who you were before all this? Remember the guys who used to chase you after you fell over themselves to win your attention? Do you recall Paul, for heaven's sake? Ever since you got married, it's like you've transformed into a completely different Nikki. Linda, that's enough. Nikki interjected, her annoyance evident in her tone. I didn't come here to be criticized, I just asked for your advice. Oh really? Linda retorted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Why do you even ask for advice if you never take it? But I'll give you one last piece of advice. Teach him to respect you, and make him understand that you have not only duties, but also rights in this relationship. Why are you letting yourself be treated like a doormat? If he is tired of you, he'll simply discard you. Let me guess that he is insisting on registering the apartment in his name. Nikki pondered for a moment before responding, he's a man, the head of the family. Linda closed her eyes and clutched her head, letting out a long, exasperated sigh before shaking her head in disbelief. Nikki watched her with a whirlpool of thoughts. Linda's words reverberated in her head, each one striking her heart like an arrow. A sudden realization dawned on her. What if Linda was right? What if, all this time, she'd been nothing more than a puppet manipulated and used by Stephen? The thought was deeply unsettling that night. Her mind was torn with thoughts and reflections, replaying memories and past events. A nagging feeling told her that Linda was mostly correct in her observations, and when Stephen returned home later that evening, her suspicions were confirmed. She glanced at the clock, it was 2 a.m. Normally, she would have risen and prepared something for him to eat, but this time she made a different choice. Instead of getting up, she simply turned over in bed, closing her eyes in an attempt to drift off to sleep. The apartment was truly magnificent. Stephen strolled around the apartment, a look of satisfaction spreading across his face. He paused by one of the windows, mumbling something under his breath as he gazed out at the view. On the man, Stephen declared to the room. Nikki couldn't suppress a small grin at his display. Catching her smile, he turned to her. What are you smiling about? Do you really think we could have bought such an apartment on your own? I doubt you'd even recognize a good investment if it stared you in the face. Nikki felt a pang of self-pity, but she chose to hold her tongue and not respond. They had finally bought the apartment, and she felt a sense of accomplishment. She was still under the impression that this was a shared victory and that she could assert her interests a bit more in their shared life. More importantly, Stephen's dream has come true. Now home would be an interesting place for him, a place where he would want to spend his time rather than elsewhere, and for a whole year, it seemed just like that. Nikki even broached the subject of starting a family. Surprised? Nikki, what baby are you talking about? Stephen asked, caught off guard, and don't start with that nonsense about us getting old. I've seen people having kids well into their 50s. Just look around. We have barely furnished displays. We need to buy things. Things fill the apartment with furniture and stuff. Nikki could only sigh a response. She wanted to retaliate and voice her own thoughts, but she found herself at a loss for words. There was truth in what Stephen was saying, and she struggled to find the counter-argument. 2 years later, the apartment's initial look was a distant memory. The place had undergone significant changes. Nikki had taken on every job she could find to earn a bit more money from. Patients driving her to buy everything they needed to make their home complete. Stephen began to vanish again, only this time he would return in the early hours of the morning. Nikki had a sinking feeling that something was about to happen, something that would completely upend her life to whatever it was. It didn't take long for it to occur. One evening as they sat down for dinner, Stephen was unusually quiet. Nikki carried the conversation, talking about work and daily chores and sharing anecdotes about her day. Honey, I'm considering buying a new couch for us. I found some really good options. There was this new company that's offering a nice thermos mark as a bonus if we purchases their couch. However, Stephen simply chewed his food and kept his gaze fixed on his plate, offering no response. Honey, did you notice the posters for the lost dog? They seem to have appeared a few days ago. Speaking of dogs, why do we consider getting one? Nikki's eye sparkled with excitement as she watched Stephen, who seemed mentally absent. He mumbled something in response, but it was too quiet for her to make out. While Nikki was accustomed to him occasionally ignoring her, his silence felt especially pronounced that day. It was uncharacteristically unlike him to stay this quiet. Stephen wiped his mouth with a napkin, signaling the end of his meal. He leaned back in his chair, let out a deep sigh, and said without looking at Nikki, I'm tired. Well, you should at least take a short walk after dinner to help with digestion. Don't just lie down right away, you need to. I'm tired of you, Nikki. Why don't you let me finish? Stephen interrupted her. I can't do this anymore. I just can't live like this any longer. I've been meaning to tell you this, but you kept distracting me with your relentless ideas. Nikki wasn't taken aback, she simply listened to him in silence. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she had a singing feeling that she knew what was coming next. I'm just not attracted to you anymore. I think it's over for us, and I need you to move out. I've been seeing someone else, and she'll be moving in soon. Perhaps it was because she had mentally prepared herself for this moment that not a single muscle twitched on Nikki's face. As she absorbed Stephen's words, her world, which had been teetering on the brink, now shattered completely, yet she felt an eerie calm. She was like a boulder, withering any storm and peeling nothing. If this all turned out to be a joke, she might even find the humor in it. Nikki was just that kind of person. Well, okay, I suppose you have every right. She responded evenly. You're an adult, and if that's your decision, there is not much I can do about it, and I'm not going to try and stop you like I said. It's your right, but I'm afraid I won't be moving out of the apartment because it's mine too, and I plan on continuing to live here. Stephen's eyes widened, and he was surprised at her boldness. He hadn't anticipated such a curveball. Actually, I own half of the apartment. Stephen retook exactly half of it. You have every right to live here, but if you choose to move out, that's also your prerogative. Nikki counter, what are you talking about? I'm your husband, after all, you're supposed to listen to me. I won't be moving into some rental, that's not going to happen. Nikki stood up and declared it firmly. Stephen, I don't want to keep arguing about this. I'm done with the discussion. I'll gather your things and put them on the couch. I trust you can pack them yourself. Nikki left a room, her determination unwavering, while Steven stood there in disbelief, his jaw dropping. He contemplated how he would break the news to his girlfriend, fully aware that she wouldn't be pleased with the turn of events. Realizing that he needed to take action, he stormed after Nikki. "You can't just say that. Why can't you understand?" Steven shouted in frustration. "You don't even have anyone, and you probably won't find another guy soon, but we need a place to live." Nikki nonchalantly shrugged her shoulders. "So where do I fit in with your needs? Am I just an obstacle in your life? You can live wherever you wish." Steven clenched his teeth and pounded his fist against the wall. He couldn't come to terms with the fact that Nikki was no longer obedient and submissive. "You're going to regret this. I'll sell my half of the ownership, and we'll see how you'll talk." Then she saw that, despite Nikki's belief that Steven was merely attempting to intimidate her, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease and doubt. The divorce proceedings unfolded in a conventional manner. Was Steven going to great lengths to meticulously divide even the kitchen utensils? He accompanied these actions with a barrage of complaints and insults, leaving Nikki feeling deeply hurt and disheartened. His new young girlfriend expressed her discontent as well, and Nikki had to endure hearing her complaints. As she followed Steven wherever he went, when the divorce proceedings finally came to an end, Nikki felt a sense of relief wash over her. However, during dismay, this relief would prove to be short-lived. Just a couple of months later, Steven unexpectedly showed up at her doorstep. "What's up, Nikki? Still happy that you kicked me out, huh?" Steven began his tone filled with bitterness. Nikki frowned and raised an eyebrow, finding his accusation absurd. "Kicked you out?" She couldn't help but chuckle at the notion. "What do you want, Steven?" "I'm just here to ask if you've reconsidered leaving the apartment for us," Steven said with a hint of desperation. "Steven, are you out of your mind? Why would I give up the apartment to you?" Nikki retorted, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Fine, suit yourself," Steven replied dismissively. "Because I've actually found a buyer for half of it. They're coming tomorrow to check it out. Enjoy being alone. I hope you regret your decision." Nikki felt a mixture of frustration and determination rise within her as she faced this new challenge. After Steven stormed out, Nikki sank into a chair, feeling a wave of sadness wash over her. For the first time since the ordeal began, she questioned herself. What did I wrong to deserve such treatment? She asked, her voice filled with anguish. We spent so many years together. Why is he intent on making my life more and more miserable? What have I done to deserve this throughout the divorce process? Nikki had tried to avoid causing unnecessary trouble. She had even agreed to many of the terms, hoping for a peaceful resolution. 3 days later, upon returning to the apartment, a sinking feeling enveloped Nikki. She had a hunch that Steven had kept his words. As she entered, the scent of frying meat filled the air. Someone was in the kitchen cooking. Nikki cautiously took a few steps forward, unable to see the person's face. Standing at the stove was a tall, physically fit man. He appeared lost in thought, holding a pinch of salt in his hand. "The table is set for 2. Nikki remarked, realizing that the man was expecting guests, but why was he using her dishes and setting her table? Nikki said confidently, ready to confront the unwelcome guest. Startled, the man jumped up, causing the salt cellar to slip from his hands. He quickly picked it up and turned to face her. "Good evening." The man began speaking hesitantly. "I'm sorry for using the kitchen without your permission. I just wanted to make getting to know you a little more." Nikki looked around, feeling confused. "Are you cooking for me?" The man finally smiled. "Yes, Steven warned me that you weren't exactly friendly with strangers, but please take a seat." Nikki, stood frozen, gazed at the man for a long moment without uttering a word. The man grew nervous, glancing at himself to ensure he didn't appear abnormal. "I mean, please don't freak out," he continued, attempting to reassure her. "Steven informed me that you own half of the apartment. I'm not going to ask how you two bought it in the first place. That's none of my business. I was just looking for an affordable place to stay. I saw the advertisement. Don't worry. I'm a contractor. We're building a house in the nearby woods. I'll be out there most of the time and hopefully won't bother you much. Please have a seat." Nikki didn't pay much attention to his explanation. She continued to observe the man, trying to figure out where she had seen him before. Did you happen to go to Red Springs High? Nikki asked the man. The man looked at her, his expression filled with surprise. He asked, "Why do you ask?" "Paul?" Nikki asked, a slight smile forming on her face. Paul replied, his eyes widening in disbelief. "You've changed a lot," Paul remarked, not expecting to encounter someone who had once been so special to him. An awkward silence filled the room before Paul broke it. "Please have a seat." Nikki complied, taking her place at the table while Paul busily arranged the dishes he had prepared. When Stephen informed him about the lonely, unfriendly woman living in the apartment, he never anticipated it would be Nikki. He found amusement in the twist of fate that had brought them together once again. "So who's Stephen? Is he your friend?" Paul asked, unaware of the irony in his question, as he had misunderstood Stephen's remark about Nikki's unfriendliness. Something stirred within Nikki. At the mention of Stephen's name, tears that she had kept hidden for so long welled up, threatening to spill over. Hey, what's happening? Are you all right?" Paul asked with concern, guiding Nikki to the sofa. She sat down, and in that moment, she found herself pouring out her story about her relationship with Stephen. During her high school years, Nikki received a lot of attention from guys, but growing up in a conservative family, Nikki had always been taught that relationships should be approached with care and seriousness. Her parents, who held traditional values, believed that fostering strong and meaningful connections required a level of thoughtfulness and commitment. They saw it as a way to protect their daughter from potential heartbreak and ensured that she would find a partner who valued and respected her. Nikki respected her parents' advice and understood that their guidance was rooted in their love for her. Their teachings helped shape her perspective on relationships, making her more discerning when it came to matters of the heart. She valued the importance of finding a genuine connection that was built on mutual respect, trust, and shared values, while her friends often indulged in casual dating and fleeting romances. Nikki approached her own relationships with caution. She knew that her parents' intentions were to provide her with a strong foundation for long-term happiness. Their emphasis on the significance of genuine and meaningful connections allowed Nikki to navigate her teenage years with a sense of purpose and integrity. As she grew older, Nikki carried these lessons with her, appreciating the value of taking relationships seriously. It instilled in her a sense of patience and a desire to find someone who shared her beliefs and aspirations. Nikki believed that her parents' advice had prepared her well for the challenges and joys that lay ahead in the realm of love and companionship during her junior year. Nikki found herself in the same class as Paul, who was a senior. Little did she know, Paul had been smitten with her from the very moment they had their first class together. However, being a shy and reserved guy, Paul hesitated to approach Nikki right away. Nikki, completely unaware of Paul's hidden feelings, never suspected that he harbored any romantic interest in her. If only she had known, perhaps things would have turned out differently. Nikki's genuine simplicity and natural beauty attracted attention from her peers, particularly the girls, who in their own insecurities, felt threatened by her presence. When word got out that Paul had feelings for Nikki, some of her friends cautioned her against pursuing her relationship with him. They claimed that he wasn't the right guy for her and warned that he would only end up breaking her heart. Paul, much like Nikki, was a person of simplicity and humility. When Nikki rejected his advances, he respected her decision and didn't push any further. He believed that if she wasn't interested, it was best to let her go and find happiness elsewhere. Both Nikki and Paul carried the weight of unspoken feelings and missed opportunities, each unaware of the other's true emotions. The untold connection between them remained hidden as they navigated their academic lives separately, never realizing the potential that had gone unexplored. Nikki and Stephen's story had a unique beginning. They first connected online through a mutual friend's post. It all started when their friend shared a question about dealing with depression while grieving the loss of her elderly parents. The comments section was filled with words of encouragement, urging her to stay strong instead of leaving a public comment. Nikki decided to reach out to her friend privately, offering support and landing a listening ear. They engaged in a heartfelt conversation, which helped uplift her friend's spirits during a difficult time. Stephen were impressed by Nikki's genuine compassion and kindness. Her friend later made another post acknowledging the power of sincere intentions. Within the post, a mutual picture of Nikki and her friend was shared, which caught the attention of several people, including one particular guy who reached out to Nikki through a direct message. That guy was Stephen. Nikki and Stephen started chatting, getting to know each other on a deeper level. Their conversations revolved around various aspects of life as they shared their experiences, thoughts, and feelings. Stephen was drawn to Nikki's compassionate nature and her willingness to lend a listening ear. He found solace and comfort in their exchanges, appreciating her genuine intention to understand and support him. As their connection deepened, so did their attraction. Stephen found himself increasingly drawn to Nikki's warmth and kindness, and he began to develop strong feelings for her. Their online conversations became an important part of their lives, allowing them to form a bond built on understanding and emotional connection. Stephen frequently vented about his frustrations with his boss at work to Nikki. During one of their conversations, he opened up about his now ex-girlfriend, expressing his dissatisfaction with her lack of support and understanding for his worries. He confided in Nikki, sharing that he had recently ended the relationship and was feeling down. He yearned for someone who could reassure him and offer to confer during this difficult time. Nikki, with her natural empathy and compassionate nature, became the perfect confidant for Stephen. She listened attentively, offering words of encouragement and assuring him that everything would be all right. Their connection grew stronger, and it wasn't long before their friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship. Their shared experiences and emotional connection served as the foundation of their relationship. Stephen found solace and understanding in Nikki's presence, appreciating her ability to provide the support he'd always longed for as their love for each other deepened. Stephen realized that Nikki was the one he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. In a heartfelt moment, Stephen took the leap and asked for Nikki's hand and heart, expressing his desire for a future together. Their journey, which started with shared conversations and emotional support, had now brought them to a pivotal moment of commitment and love. After Paul finished listening to Nikki's heartfelt story about her journey with Stephen, he rose from his seat, a hint of anger visible on his face. The weight of Nikki's experience resonated with him, and he couldn't help but feel a mix of empathy and frustration on her behalf. "I'm truly sorry about the predicament you've been through." Paul began, his voice filled with genuine sympathy, "But hey, at least now you're free from that toxic relationship, and that's definitely a positive outcome." Nikki felt a surge of relief and gratitude as Paul acknowledged her newfound freedom. It was a bittersweet moment as she realized how blind she had been to Stephen's manipulative ways for all those years. She reflected on missed red flags and moments of doubt that she had brushed aside in the past. As Paul skillfully removed the plastic cover from the salad container, Nikki watched his movements, finding solace in the simplicity of the task. The act of uncovering the salad became symbolic for Nikki, an unveiling of truth and clarity in her life. A mix of emotions flooded her mind as she gazed at Paul. Here they were sharing an unexpected moment together, connected by shared experiences and newfound understanding. His self-deprecating humor broke the tension, bringing a much-needed likeness to the atmosphere with the plates and salad meticulously arranged. Paul reached into his bag and produced a bottle of wine. Nikki's eyes lit up with surprise and appreciation as he effortlessly opened it and gestured to create an atmosphere of relaxation and enjoyment. Please, make yourself comfortable." Paul invited Nikki with a warm smile, motioning for her to join him at the table. "Let's forget about everything for a moment. Nikki, tonight, let's savor this meal. Unwind and find solace in each other's company. No worries, no stress, just a quiet moment of shared peace and enjoyment." They sat at the table, eating and engaging in lively conversation. Nikki's mood gradually improved as the evening unfolded, and she found herself talking nonstop, pouring out her thoughts and experiences. Paul too shared stories and listened attentively, creating a safe space for open dialogue and connection. Their shared laughter and meaningful exchanges carried them through the night, extending their conversation until the early hours of the morning. As they finished their meal, Nikki's mind became filled with thoughts and reflections lost in her contemplation. She lowered her gaze, unaware that Paul was attuned to her emotions. Sensing her introspection, he broke the silence with his words, carrying a touch of sincerity. "What a day it has been," Paul remarked, a smile playing on his lips. "I truly had a wonderful evening with you. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I can imagine you must be tired and in need of rest." Nikki nodded, acknowledging her fatigue. "Yes, I should get some sleep. Thank you for the delightful dinner and the pleasant conversation." As Nikki started to rise from her seat, preparing to clear the table, Paul reached out, gently placing his hand on hers, causing her to pause. His touch sent a subtle jolt of warmth through her, and she looked at him curiously. "I'll take care of this." Paul offered a reassuring smile, gracing his face. Go ahead and get some sleep. You deserve it. Nikki smiled and expressed her appreciation. She headed towards her bedroom, her mind swirling with a mix of emotions and new possibilities, but just as she was about to exit the kitchen, a sudden urge compelled her to turn back and see clarity with newfound courage. She spoke up, her voice filled with determination. Paul, are you ready? Before she could finish her sentence, Paul anticipated her question and gently interrupted. Nikki, I did try, but it didn't work out. Nikki had taken the day off from work, intending to have a relaxing morning and indulge in some well-deserved rest. However, a curious feeling tugged at her, prompting her to check if Paul was still in the apartment. Curiosity got the better of her, and she quietly made her way to the kitchen. To her surprise and delight, there was Paul standing at the stove, skillfully preparing omelets as if he had never left since the night before. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, captivating Nikki's senses. She stood at the doorway, a gentle smile playing on her lips as she observed him. In that moment, an unexpected desire welled up within her, a longing to stay at home, to cast aside all obligations and commitments and simply revel in the presence of this wonderful person in the kitchen. It was a newfound feeling that made her question the rush of the outside world and embrace the simple joys of being in the company of someone who understood her, and she watched Paul completely unaware of her presence. Nikki felt a sense of comfort and tranquility settle over her. It was as if time stood still, encapsulating a rare moment of connection and contentment in that kitchen with a tantalizing scent of coffee. With Paul's focus, yet serene demeanor, Nikki realized that sometimes the greatest moments could be found in the simplicity of shared space and genuine companionship. In the months that followed, Nikki and Paul embarked on a series of delightful adventures together, and laughter became a constant presence in their lives, something Nikki had experienced in such abundance throughout her marriage. Paul's infectious sense of humor brought joy and lightheartedness into their days, lifting Nikki's spirits and reminding her of the beauty of genuine laughter that began as a roommate. The arrangement blossomed into a remarkable connection between two souls. Nikki and Paul discovered the perfect harmony in their companionship, finding solace and support in each other's presence. They effortlessly complemented one another, their strengths and weaknesses blending seamlessly. Paul, determined to bring joy into Nikki's life, delighted her with a multitude of surprises, from spontaneous day trips to hidden picnic spots to surprise movies, nights under the stars. Paul consistently went above and beyond to create memorable experiences for both of them. As the bond between them deepened, their relationship naturally evolved into a romantic one. Nikki couldn't deny the growing affection she felt for Paul, a love that bloomed from a foundation of trust, shared experiences, and genuine connection. They embarked on this new chapter with excitement, cherishing the journey they were embarking upon together. Nikki finally felt a sense of liberation, realizing that true happiness could exist beyond the confines of her previous marriage. With Paul by her side, she discovered the joys of being herself, embraced by love, laughter, and an unwavering support that filled her heart with warmth and contentment. Angela nudged Stephen on the side. Look at that jacket, honey. I want one too. Stephen frowned. Angela's demands were so high that the money they made from selling half of the apartment evaporated like smoke, and Stephen couldn't afford to tell Angela that. She would start complaining right away, saying, "Aren't you a man? Aren't you the breadwinner? Do something." Stephen tried to lure her away, but Angela stood there firmly. He had seen the price tag for such a jacket. Please, 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 honey, I want the same jacket. It's trendy right now." At that moment, the woman wearing the jacket said something to the man standing next to her. He leaned in and took her by the hand. They both turned around and faced Stephen and Angela. Stephen froze in his tracks and Angela grew quiet. It was clear that the woman wearing the trendy jacket was also clearly pregnant and was none other than Nikki. She recognized her ex-husband, and Stephen recognized the buyer of half of his apartment as well. Paul immediately stiffened as if ready to protect his wife. If anything happened, Stephen's face contorted in the eye. A smirk appeared on his face. Well, look who's here. You turned out to be way more cunning than you seemed. You tricked the buyer so you don't lose the apartment." Stephen had more to say, but he couldn't continue because of a heavy blow that knocked him down. Paul squatted over him and said, "Listen to me, prick. Never ever look at or say anything to my wife again. If you try, I'm going to break your neck. I promise." Now, do you understand? Stephen began nodding profusely. Paul got up and straightened himself. He looked at Stephen's wife, who was standing there, not knowing what to do, and said, "I've got nothing against you. I apologize for hitting your husband in front of you." Paul took Nikki's hand, and they headed towards the exit. Stephen got up, turned to Angela, and said, "Did you see that? You're the witness, I'm going to sue them." Angela looked at him with irritation and replied, "Keep me out of your dirty business, you loser." She headed towards the exit. "Honey, come on, don't go. I need a hand, please," but Angela just waved her hand and disappeared.